Arkansas, for Arkansas. This is Inside Arkansas Live.
And welcome into Inside Arkansas Live here on this beautiful day here in the great state of Arkansas. I'm your host, John Neighbors, alongside Curtis Wilkerson and Andrew Ellis. Appreciate each and every one of you making us a part of your afternoon this afternoon. Hopefully everybody had a wonderful weekend. But, fellas, it is game week, and that's the reason why we're a little delayed than normal, because Sam Pittman met with the media previewing old game week, so we'll talk about that. But doesn't it feel good to know that Razorback football is going to be happening this week? A real game, no practice, no scrimmage, no nonsense, just an actual game where we can actually take things from it. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I got a little bit of a taste of it over the weekend with some college football finally being played. Now I'm ready to see the Razorbacks, man. It's going to be a ton of fun, even though it's, UAPB at War Memorial Stadium and all those things.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's perfect because it's a game week, but it's a shortened game week. We don't have to wait that much longer. We've done all the talking we can do. We're going to still do some more talking. But yeah, we get real football to look forward to. And it's a stress-free game, which is also adds to it. If Arkansas were playing Oklahoma State Thursday, there'd be a lot more anxiety in the air, a lot more whatever. But right now we can just look forward with excitement. And that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. And I know that when Mondays come around at noon, that's when Sam Pittman is going to meet with the media the majority of the season. And since it's a shortened week too, it's kind of a different schedule for those press conferences. Tomorrow we'll get to hear from the players. I guess they're doing the catfish hole thing, I believe. And then that's pretty much it as far as hearing from the coaches, which is, to me at this point, totally fine, because other than getting the depth chart today, which we'll talk about, and if you haven't checked it out, go to InsideArkansas.com to see it. But other than that, it's like there's nothing else to say. There's nothing else to be done.
Yeah, there's really not, especially before, a game against an FCS opponent to start the year. But yeah, I can't wait to talk about this because it's really funny. You get the depth chart about a half hour before the press conference and you're looking through it. And I made a bunch of notes like, dang, I'm surprised by this. Oh, this is crazy. Oh, we got to talk about this. And then you get Sam Pittman at noon and you quickly realize he didn't put this thing together, man. So you start to hear some of, his takes on different position battles or whatever. And you look back at that depth chart and you go, wait a second, this ain't adding up. So take those things with a grain of salt when they're released in the game notes. That's the best advice I could give everybody, but still some interesting things there and definitely some interesting comments from Sam.
Yeah, it is so funny how like us as a fan base and as just journalists and all that, we overanalyze everything. And I get it. I mean, we do it. I know the fans do it. And then you hear Pittman talk about it. And like you said, you can kind of tell he really didn't put much thought into it. Like they asked him about the kicker thing and I could see it in his face. When you're getting asked about something that you have no idea what the person's talking about, when they ask him, they're like, hey, there's an Oric kicker. And he's like, okay, yeah, that's interesting. It was totally a real thing, but yeah,
just haven't talked to the kickers yet.
Yeah, there were a lot of weird things on the depth chart because I'm like you, Curtis, where I looked at it and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Didn't expect an or there. Didn't expect an or there. But yeah, it is so funny that this is a perfect Monday game week where we're overreacting to a depth chart that Pittman probably threw together in 2 minutes right before he went to the press conference.
I mean, we could together come up with a depth chart and put it out before Monday's press conference or whatever each week, and probably maybe be just as correct or just as right on.
Well, we damn near did a couple weeks ago, I guess.
Yeah. Like, that's how random it is. It's just kind of like, all right, well, maybe some of these things are right, but some of these things may not be right. So who knows? But that's kind of the funny thing about these depth charts is not exactly factual in a lot of cases. And, the few things that we'll bring up and we'll talk about that. I know, guys, there's a few of those little things that stand out, but the biggest thing, and I know we've been talking about it and it's been a concern, has to deal with Patrick Kutas, where he hasn't been healthy. That's just plain and simple. He's not been healthy this fall camp. He is crucial. He is crucial to this offensive line play and knowing how good of a player he is. If you looked at the official U of A depth chart, he was listed as an or with a Marion Harris, but it doesn't look like he's going to be healthy for at least a while. I mean, he's not even going to be playing against UAPB, but let's hear from Sam Pittman when he talked about Patrick Kutas and the situation he's in.
How's that situation playing out? I don't believe Patrick will play, but I'll say this too, and we'll miss him because he's a good player and back's still bothering him. But Marion Harris has had an outstanding camp, and I don't know that there'll be any drop off there. I think he's not five, Trey. If you were going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, he's not five. I don't know where he's at. I don't know if he's 3. I don't know if he's 4, but he's not 5. He's really done a really good job. I'm really pleased with how he's come along and gained his weight and playing, and he's always in position. I'm really happy for him.
Okay, so Marion Harris, the guy, but Patrick Kudus, he's not going to play. I don't know what to make of this, but it doesn't feel good about the chances of Patrick Kudus and his health moving forward.
Okay, yeah, and so I've got a couple thoughts on this. One, when that depth chart came out, this is a perfect example. We saw Kudus or Marion Harris, so immediately I'm thinking, okay, so maybe he's been progressing in practice. There's a chance that he's going to be available to play. Maybe he can get some reps, whatever. But then you hear that from Pittman and you go, oh, okay, well, maybe that's not the case. A little bit later, Sam talks more about Patrick Kudus and says, yeah, well, he was doing pool work, some rehab, which that's pretty common with back injury, especially with offensive linemen. He progressed to doing some stuff on land. He was doing a little bit of hitting. Oh, by the way, we're going to get him an MRI on Friday. Well, if his back's been hurting him all camp, why didn't he get an MRI before? Or was there some sort of setback here to where you're like, hey, you know what? We need to take a little bit deeper of a look. I do not think that's a good sign at all. And I mean, we'll see what the results say, but in terms of his, not just availability for UAPB, but, maybe in the few weeks here moving forward, that raises a red flag. And you hear good things there about Marion Harris, and hey, I'm pulling for him, man. Like, I hope he comes in and dominates, but I think you can look at that a couple different ways when Sam says, hey, if you're ranking these offensive linemen 1 through 5, Marion Harris ain't 5. Well, who is? If this was the guy who was, projected to be a backup and, has only played in a handful of games throughout the course of his career, is that, kudos to Marion Harris for just taking huge strides and emerging as a dude on the offensive line, or there's some other question marks here? I guess we'll kind of start to find out on Thursday.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this. I mean, obviously, with Patrick Kudus, there's the fact of the Sam Pittman injury case is always weird, where he starts detailing things and you start to be like, oh, this doesn't really add up. Like, he's been doing stuff in the pool and now he's elevated to land, which is what he said. But he also said, he was like, there's been some hitting, where I'm like, it's been hitting. Like, does that mean he's like actually practicing? And if that's the case, then like, what are you waiting until like Friday? We're doing an MRI. Like, there's just a lot that doesn't really make sense. And so I think it's very fair to be concerned about Patrick Kudus and his health moving forward. And obviously the UAPB game is what it is. It's not like you need everyone fully locked in. Like, I think a lot of these guys, if you're on the fence about being injured, should probably sit or be limited. But I mean, you have a pretty important game week 2. And so do you really feel comfortable? Say all systems go, Patrick Kudus is back at practice next Monday. Do you really trust him to go and play in that Oklahoma State game? But I'm glad you mentioned the fact that he said Marion Harris isn't number 5, like he's 3 or 4 or whatever, which is fine. And I actually believe that, just based on what we've been hearing and some of the stuff they've been saying about how improved he is. But that begs the question of, like, when Kudus does get back, what happens?
Right.
Do you just kind of move a guy over? Does Kudus maybe try back at center? Because you ask Curtis, who is 5? I think Addison Nichols is 5. And so maybe that causes a little bit of a controversy there. Is Kudus going to be healthy enough to even factor into that discussion? Like, there are a lot of questions about this situation where, frankly, when it first started off and it was like, oh yeah, he'll miss a week of practice, but he'll be back. Like, I really didn't see it playing out this way and being such a big storyline that I think is going to affect a good bit of the first part of Arkansas season for sure.
Well, and also, going back to the whole point of it, we heard from Eric Mateos, and that was something that we talked about as far as, you just want your best 5 guys out there, and then they're talking about rotating guys and putting different guys in those starting positions, which I just have always felt like that's not a good way of going about it. But then it's like, okay, so if Marion Harris is that high on the list, then if Kudus was healthy, would he be at a different position right now then? Or would you still be having him backing him up? Because if he's not the 5, if he's a 3 or 4 or wherever, isn't that what the whole point is of you cross-training and doing all these things and having your best 5 on the field would be him? So would he be taking the place of somebody else? Like, I'm with y'all. That's just really confusing, I guess, of how they've approached it, how they've dealt with Kudus. And now, again, UAPB, you should be able to win that game without having Patrick Kudus out there. But Oklahoma State, I don't know if you can. And if you don't have him out there, it's like, do you rush him back? Do you try to say, well, depending on how they perform in the UAPB game and say, okay, well, because they perform so well, then we'll be okay here in the Oklahoma State game. There's just, it could cause a lot of problems, and it could be very, very problematic against Oklahoma State if, one, this setup of offensive linemen is not the best you could throw out there. And two, if Kudus is not healthy or not ready for Oklahoma State, that could be really problematic for the entire offense, especially on the road in Stillwater.
Well, I'm no doctor, but I was an athletic trainer for 10 years, and I worked with college football teams for a long time during that period. If you have an offensive lineman, a guy that size who's dealing with a back and has been doing pull work and everything else, he is nowhere near game shape from a conditioning standpoint. He's just not right now. And if he's getting an MRI on Friday, I would say it's highly unlikely that he is up to game speed for that Oklahoma State game. Maybe he's healthy and he's cleared and they can get him out there a little bit, but it's not going to be the best version of him if that's the case. So I've kind of already, switched my expectations to, I don't know, maybe, week 3 or 4 or a little bit down the line, because it's a really tough turnaround for such a big man. And who knows what that MRI even says. And that's assuming, that everything there was that Pittman said was accurate. I'm not saying he's making it up or anything like that, but in terms of time frame and all that kind of stuff, because the only details we have to go off is what he's saying. But from a strictly medical standpoint and rehabilitation and recovery, I'm not really expecting to see him for Oklahoma State either at this point.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there, Curtis. It's probably safe to at least assume that at this point. I mean, look, if we hear something else, if we hear Friday, oh yeah, he's made a miraculous comeback, he'll be ready to go. Cool. And I think, there's a way to look at this in a nutshell and say, well, if Marion Harris really is playing as well as they say he is it really that big of a deal? I mean, we'll see how it works out. But what's interesting to me is Marion Harris is listed as the second team left tackle as well. And we've talked about that in fall camp.
Good
where
point.
He's kind of their guy that can mix and match wherever. Now you leave yourself in a situation where you're really susceptible to, if something happens to Carmona, now you're really scrambling and trying to mix and match guys wherever. And, I'm speaking of Carmona, he might be their way out, where we've seen him at left tackle every single snap since he got on campus. And that's kind of been the spot they view him at. But he's got experience at center and he's got experience at guard. I wonder if he becomes the guy where if they start having to move some things around and you get Kudus back healthy, if Carmona's not the guy that kind of goes on the move and they just have to mix and match however they can. But as of right now, man, it just doesn't seem like Arkansas is going to have a ton of options if there's another injury to the offensive line. And so it can get thin real quick there. And for a group that has a lot riding on it, that was obviously one of the worst in the country last year, that we're expecting improvement out of, and there's a lot of pressure on them, it's just not what you want to see going into the season, frankly.
Yeah. And best case scenario, and obviously we're talking about a lot of hypotheticals here, and it's very valid because offensive linemen get hurt all the time, and depth is an issue for this group. Best case, Marion Harris is just really solid, and they keep that 5 until Kudus gets healthy, and then you have a good old fashioned position battle and you figure it out. Hopefully that's the case. But man, when's the last time something worked out the way you hoped it did for Arkansas football?
No, never. And like, I'm gonna be honest, I'll sound the alarm if Arkansas can't run the ball effectively against UAPB, even with Kudus out. Like, I'm sounding the alarm. Like, if they cannot establish a run, if Jaquindon Jackson, or Rashad Dubinion, because there is an or there, whichever running back's back there, if we're talking about, at halftime, Arkansas's got 24 yards rushing on 12 carries, I'm sounding the alarm. I'm having major issues, because that is going to be a problem, and you're not going to be ready for Oklahoma State. So,
well, I mean, I don't know if we have an order of operation here, but like, speaking of who's going to be back there running the ball, another thing with this depth chart is I was really surprised to look at it, and it was Rashad Dubinion or Jaquindon Jackson as the starter. And I was thinking, really? I really didn't see that coming. But then you talk to Sam Pittman, and he's actually like, nah, I feel like, Jackson's going to be the first guy out there. And then probably Rodney Hill, to be honest with you, because R-Dub's he's been banged up. So we don't really know how available he's going to be if he's full go. So again, take the depth chart with a grain of salt, man. But sounds like old Rodney Hill bringing a different flavor to the room is going to maybe get some reps there.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was very fascinating, and yeah, especially when you're like, okay, R-Dub, they gave him the courtesy or at the first team, and then Pittman's like, oh, he's been banged up. Yeah, I don't even know how available he's going to be. Again, it just kind of speaks to the overall nature, the things of that nature of how this depth chart always works out. Where don't take it at face value all the time. It's going to change. It's going to contradict itself a lot of times, and we'll just see how it plays out. But yeah, just looking at the depth chart here, also the receiver position wasn't exactly how I thought it was going to play out. Now, Curtis and I obviously did our episode of Pot of That Nature where we did the receiver, we did the offensive depth chart and defensive depth chart, and the names don't really stun me. But Curtis, were you surprised by the order of it, or just kind of where all these guys went?
Yeah, maybe a bit in some ways. And that's another thing Pittman mentioned was he wasn't 100% sure about Andrew Armstrong. I mean, he's been banged up and he's been practicing, but didn't know if he was going to be full go or not. And honestly, I hate to be that guy because you don't take anything for granted. But like if he needs to rest up against UAPB, okay, fine. But yeah, to see Monte Harrison actually listed there as the two above a guy who's been around for a long time and Jaden Wilson, I shouldn't be surprised after some of the things we heard in fall camp, but I think it kind of verifies a lot of those things. Looking at the slot, Satania, we expected Tesla. I mean, I would say that's probably about what we anticipated, but the other side at the Z is kind of what surprised me the most. Not that Broden is the projected starter there, but Jordan Anthony, man, sounds like he is really starting to emerge. And Sam had some good words to say about him. And then, CJ Brown, the freshman, we've heard a lot of things about. Davion Dozier thought it was time for the come up. And at least on this depth chart, he's a 4-string guy there on the outside. It's a little surprising to me.
Yeah. And also too, like I look at it with the wide receivers, probably just because I've been playing the EA Sports College Football video game. I'm like, okay, so when they go out there with 5 wide receivers, just no running backs, no, just 5 wide. It's like, who are those 5 going to be? And that's kind of how I look at it from where you got 3 starting. You know, it's going to be Armstrong, Satanian, Broden's going to be out there, but who are going to be those other 2 guys that they're going to have in that mix? And I'm thinking that just because of Monty Harrison, and at first I was going to say Tesla, but I don't even know if it's going to be him in that spot, just because of, having the Jordan Anthony love that they've had and everything. So, I mean, yeah, it's, the Davion Dozier thing I was really disappointed in just because I was hoping that maybe he could finally find a way to bust through and to get in there. But when you're,
for all we know, he's starting.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, this could be completely and totally wrong. And I mean, it already has been for most part, but yeah, I mean, we could see that being problematic where, a guy that's not even listed on the depth chart might even be into the game for all we know at a wide receiver spot. I honestly don't know, but man, there's options there at wide receiver and at running back. And also because tight end has also been such a big name and big discussion point. Luke Hasz is a starter, which is not surprising, which by the way, real quick, actually, no, we'll go back to that, but him starting, then Varkey's Gums being the second guy, followed by Ty Washington, and also by the guy that everyone wants to know about in press conferences, apparently Andreas Poski. So you got the 4 deep tight ends there. A little surprised to see Gums right there as the second guy behind Hasz.
A week ago, I probably would have projected that. I think maybe we did because we'd heard so many good things about how Gums has been coming on so strong. And, Ty Washington missed a good portion of the spring with that injury. But then the last several days, we've been hearing more and more about, how Ty Washington's been coming around. You did the Bobby Petrino impression of him there. He had some nice words to say about him. So yeah, I don't know. I guess more than anything, I'm surprised you put ors everywhere on this depth chart. I'm kind of surprised there's not an or between those 2 guys. They're both going to play.
Yeah. How about there being an or for kicker? And then I see Adam here brings it up at long snapper. Eli Stein is just like a steady rock starter for like 3 years. There's like, let's throw it. Let's slap an or on there. And Curtis, if you remember when we did our defensive depth chart, I projected an or for Danny Saili and Ian Jaffrard. There was no or for them. And then you hear from Pittman in the press conference, and he's like, yeah, it's going to be an or with those guys. We need one of them to step up. And I'm just like, what are we doing, man? It's just complete misinformation is what this depth chart is. And it's weird because it's not like completely inaccurate or anything. Like it's for the most part what we expected, but it seems like there really was not a ton of thought. And, going back to Davion Dozier a bit, I really honestly, in my heart of hearts, guys, I think that they were just writing down receivers, and then they got to the end and we're like, oh crap, we forgot about Davion Dozier. Let's just throw him in there. He'll be the 4th team X or whatever. And you're just like, all right, like I really don't know if we can take much from this. Like the more I'm really thinking about it and looking at it and piecing it together with what Sam said, I think they're messing with us. I really do.
So of all the ors that are listed, not what Pittman said, but the ones that are actually listed on the depth chart, which is the most like believable and actually true or that's listed?
I would probably say that second corner position that seems to be very much up in the air. Although he did say he felt like Cuddy Robinson might be the guy, but it depends on the other two who are getting healthy, or that defensive end between Nico and Anton Junkaj, which I mean, both those guys are going to play a ton, but it's pretty interesting for sure.
I'm also kind of buying. I mean, the Hudson Clark, TJ Metcalf, or we kind of saw coming. They had mentioned that it was a battle, and I think it was about 2 weeks ago when he first kind of was like, TJ, he's battling there. So it seems like now the thing is with that position, and obviously with Junkaj and Davier, and really probably even the corner spot, we expect all these guys to play. Like even if Hudson Clark is not the number one guy, like they're not just going to completely do away with him. And TJ Metcalf, if he doesn't end up being the first guy out there with the safeties, like they're still going to work him in a good bit. And so, yeah, I think defensively the oars made a little bit more sense. But also, Curtis, you touched on this in our group message. How about Anthony Switzer finding himself in a position battle? I would have thought that he'd be in a position battle with maybe Brad Spence for the starting job, but true freshman Bradley Shaw, I believe he's the kid from Hoover, getting in there. There was a question asked about him like early in fall camp, and Pittman gave a good answer. And I remember at the time thinking that was a fake answer. Like he just kind of did the courtesy. Oh yeah, he's playing well. He's flashing for us. But it seems like, I mean, I noticed that Carson Dean was not in the 2 deep depth chart. Alex Sanford was on the other side, but I thought that was interesting that you get the true freshman Bradley Shaw at an or with a guy who was all conference in the Mountain West last year. So turns out linebacker, they just keep adding dudes, man. Every week we find out Arkansas has another good linebacker. How about that?
Yeah, that is really interesting. And Bradley Shaw's a guy there's been a lot of buzz about in camp. And Travis Williams was asked about him the other day in that most recent press conference, and he was pretty clear saying, "Hey, kid's going to play. He's going to play. He's going to help us." And so it's good to see him on there. Yeah, the deal with Switzer and Larry Worth is interesting. Larry Worth listed as the backup safety. Obviously, he came in as a linebacker. I thought maybe he'd fit into the equation at nickel or hog or whatever you want to call it. So we'll see how that all shakes out. And then, yeah, Switzer, I don't know, man, like 6 foot 220. That doesn't strike me as an SEC size linebacker, but they keep talking about how he'll take somebody's head off. I like that aggressiveness. And I don't know. I just thought he would be very clearly a 2, but I think it's just a situation where they expect both of those guys to be rotating in. And when you have somebody like Switzer, they call him the Switz Army knife, which I like. I like that. Some of those nicknames are cheesy. I like that one. Okay. But you can probably just move him around so many places. It's hard to just put him on one spot on a depth chart like this.
Yeah. And then also throwing in, you talk about his size with Switzer. That's kind of how I feel about with Larry Worth at safety, being 6'4", 224. I'm like, that's a pretty tall safety. Like that reminds me of like when they tried to make Anthony Leon way back when a safety, because he was like 6'4", 6'5". And guess what? They moved him to linebacker and he ended up being pretty good. But yeah, that's the thing is when you hear about all these names, we've talked about all these names and we go through and then we see it, it's like, okay, I don't know if this is what's going to be right, what's going to be wrong, where's it going to be correct at, or anything like that. But Sam Pittman also, since we've talked about a few of these, but going back to the cornerback battle, Sam Pittman brought this up about the cornerbacks and how he sees that playing out.
No, I think they're all really good players. Part of that, again, when Cal makes me do this, it's because we're beat up a little bit, so I'm going, well, when are they coming back? All this stuff. But Singletary's been, he's had a little hamstring, that set him back a little bit, and Stu's been beat up just a little bit as well. But I think all 3 of those guys are healthy, and I've really liked what Cuddy's done, what he's done. And so we'll see if we get through healthy the next 2 days. I expect for Cuddy to be the guy there.
So apparently he's made to do it by the SID Kyle Larkinson. So he has to do this. But that's what I'm saying. Like I was looking at this depth chart, And then when I hear Sam Pittman, it's like, why am I even paying attention to this thing? Like I just need to delete this thing. Like, why am I looking at this? Why does it matter? But the cornerback battle, which we know the secondary is important. They got depth there, but I guess all three guys are gonna be in the mix and gonna play. I guess that's all we can say about it.
Here's the thing about depth, though. Like, do you have a bunch of dudes who are very similar in skill set, or do you have a dude? And that's what bothers me about this is, I mean, I love the idea of Jalen Braxton. Now he is just a sophomore, so he really came on strong at the end of last year. I think he's going to be very, very good. But you would like to have that other spot opposite of him locked down, no questions. Like, you've got your other guy there. And then, you feel comfortable with 3 or 4 guys, behind those 2 that you can rotate in and out. And that's great. But what it sounds like to me is they have one dude and just a bunch of guys they're trying to figure out, who's next up or whatever. So there's just not any separation there. I mean, sure, glass half full, that could be a good thing. And this is the deepest corner room in the SEC. And these guys are just really going to be balling out no matter who you have out there. The glass half empty side of me is thinking, well, maybe they just really don't have a good answer at that spot. And it's going to be musical chairs, kind of like it was last year at that position until Braxton really took over to go alongside Nudie there.
Y'all ready for some Kool-Aid? I'm about to drop it. Some optimism here. I am choosing to read between the lines and kind of pick my interpretation of it. It reminds me a little bit of when Dwight McGlothern, y'all remember the controversy when he first got to Arkansas? They didn't list him. He didn't run with the ones at practice, like, ever, until the first game happened. And all of a sudden he was the starting corner and he had a pick on the opening drive. And then he turned out to be like an all SEC caliber player. But they kept kind of doing it. Like, Malik Chavis was the guy who at this time was still a corner, and they kept kind of giving him the courtesy nod with the ones. I wonder if that's not happening a little bit with Marquise Robinson and some of these other, because you got Keon Stewart and Jaheim Singletary, who are returners, both of which played a decent amount for you last year. I think that Sam was trying to do the nice thing and not just immediately be like, all right, Marquise Robinson's the number one guy. And I think especially because Marquise obviously missed some time in camp. And so I feel like it's one of those where, I mean, he said it himself. He expects Marquise to be the guy. It's also not all oars are created equal, where when you have returning starters that have an oar and the guy who's a newcomer is listed above them, is it really an oar? And so I've kind of been high on Marquise Robinson all offseason. I just really like his personality. I mean, after the presser the other day, I feel like he showed some of that, personality and why he's going to be a fan favorite. I also think he's coming off a really solid year at South Alabama, and I just buy him more as a real legitimate guy opposite Jalen Braxton than I do those other guys who I've seen play football and seen them not play football well. And so a little bit of it is by default, but I do think Marquise Robinson, if he hadn't gotten banged up in fall camp, and all these guys have had their time being banged up, but I feel like if he hadn't been banged up in camp, he probably would be a little bit more solidified. And I could see it being one of those things where he starts playing well early in the year. We see that depth chart disappear, and it's a thing where we look back and we were like, remember when we were pretending to do a position battle over there at corner? Like, I really think there's a chance that happens.
Well, I hope you're right. With that little version of your Kool-Aid there, I definitely do. And I hope all oars aren't created equal, because neither Singletary nor Keon Stewart were good for Arkansas at that spot last year. So I hope that the South Alabama transfer is ready to step in and lock down one half of the field in the SEC.
Yeah, and
I hope that's the case.
I'll be honest. I've always hated the oars for many reasons, but it's like some people try to be, speaking of Kool-Aid, throwing it around and be like, you know what, just because they're just both really good, you don't know who to play. To me, more often than not, it's not that. It's that both of them might be solid or decent enough, but they keep making mistakes one day and the next day and the next day, to where it's like, okay, one of y'all has to figure this out. One of y'all has to step forward. And here we are going into the season. We still have not trusted either of you enough to give you that starting role. That's how I've always seen the oars be, at least the legitimate oars end up being. But Jaquindon Jackson, that thing, again, don't look at that, because he's going to start. Jaquindon Jackson's going to start.
That's a perfect example of Andrew's courtesy oar there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to keep the carrot in front of the other guy. You know what I mean? Like, because think about it. If you have Marquise Robinson, you're like, all right, he's the corner. You other guys suck. They kind of check out a little bit. You got to keep the carrot in front of them. Hey, it's an or. Maybe if you play well and you play hard, maybe we'll move. It's just a little game. These guys aren't going to start. They stink.
Well, here's the thing. We have other things, speaking of stinking, that we're going to talk about with Sam Pittman and some of the quotes that he had in dealing with some interesting things heading into game week. But we want to remind everybody that we're brought to you by Alumni Hall here in Fayetteville. It's the ultimate Razorback shopping destination. For those of you who are looking for the Razorback gear, that is the newest and greatest, no matter if it's football, basketball, or even baseball, like this jersey I'm wearing here today. You can check them out with Alumni Hall by going to their website at alumnihall.com. You can see their entire inventory. They got the nicest apparel, whether it's Johnnie-O, Peter Millar, Nike, Columbia, everything. They got official coaches apparel. They got the jerseys, and they got it for men, women, and children, for everyone. So check them out today. You can visit their location, conveniently located at 3417 North College Avenue in Fayetteville. And you can also shop them online at alumnihall.com. It's Alumni Hall, the ultimate Razorback shopping destination. Okay, so captains are always something that's an honor. And, you get to wear that C with pride on your jersey because you're a captain. And we've seen and known who the captains have been so far in the Sam Pittman era. Well, what about this year? Well, we don't know.
Well, I've changed that one too, with the portal and all that. I think naming captains this early. When I was at Georgia, Trey, they named them after the season, and they just had a rotating guys. I do think what we're going to do is we're going to name 4 game day captains for a while. And I don't know how long that's going to be. I don't know if that's going to be to game 10. I don't know if that's going to be during the bowl prep. I don't know when that's going to be that we decide who our captains are. But I just think here, twofold, Trey, to be honest. I think that we have too many captain-like guys on our team right now to get to 4. I think let's let them play a little bit. Let's see them in the adversity. Let's see who really is the leaders on a Saturday afternoon. Again, we have 39 new guys. So I just thought that it would be kind of cool if at the end of the year, if you had 48 guys or you had 36 guys that represented the team as captains. I mean, let's look at this. You're going to Little Rock. So if you're sitting there thinking who could be game day captains, well, you start thinking about your kids from Little Rock that are starting. You start thinking about maybe a guy from Memphis, whatever. And I think it would mean something to those kids. And they had the opportunity to walk out there. And, captains have changed. They never ask a captain, what do you want to do or anything. Most of the time they don't ask me. They just, you're going to take the penalty and we're moving on. So that's really something that could kind of be neat that I thought about, that you could have 40, 48 guys in a 12 game go out there and then maybe decide who really earned the captain spot after the year during possibly bowl prep.
Just kind of going.
Okay, I don't like that really, because the old adage of if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. I kind of feel the same way that if you have 48 captains, you got none. You don't have captains.
Well, I'm not trying. I feel like I'm coming across as very negative today. I'm not trying to be, but man, miss me with some of this. I'm sorry. What is this? Is this like the T-ball? Everybody gets a participation trophy. We don't want to hurt any feelings thing. Like, I mean, I get it. And it's whatever. Like, it's a nice idea and, keep people happy. Maybe if you name 4 captains at the end of the season, you'll get through a season without one of your captains transferring. I don't know. Just name captains, man. I don't know. Oh man.
I don't want to be like unfair because I really don't think like this is actually like a sign of something bad. I'm not going to try and overreact and be like, oh, this is proof that Arkansas has an issue or anything like that. Because I really think like Sam just thought it was a good idea in his head and said it. But it's just one of those things where I agree with you guys. Like if you have 48 captains, you don't have one. But captain is such a weird thing anyway, where it's like it doesn't really mean that much. But I don't know, man. Like people kind of work their whole lives and they work their entire careers to kind of work up to be in that conversation. So yeah, I don't think there's any harm in giving the nod, like having a team vote, doing whatever it is. Like there's a lot of ways you can do it. It's not like you have to have captains, but I do think having a rotating cast of potentially 48 with different ones. And he also mentioned, and Trey kind of followed it up when he asked the question where he's like, he mentioned you might have captains from North Little Rock, Arkansas. And I'm like, I don't know. That's a very bizarre way to do it. So shout out to Quincy Rhodes, though. He cracked the 2 deep as a redshirt freshman. He's going to be the number 2 defensive end. Now, apparently, he's a captain. So congratulations to him and Nico Davier. They're going to be out there for the snap. It's going to be great.
Well, it's so interesting to me, man. Like, I don't know. Taylon Green, Landon Jackson, there's half of them. Find 2 more. I don't know.
Well, here's my like crazy idea. Just stay with me on this. Maybe what you do is you get the team to come together and vote on the 4 captains, and you go from there.
Literally.
Done. Yeah. Like, I mean, what a crazy concept. Because that's my thing is people who say, hey, it's the captains. It doesn't matter. Okay. If it doesn't matter, then you just throw 4 names out there and who cares? But it does kind of matter. It either matters to the team, matters to the coaches, matters to the players, matters to whoever. It matters somehow. Or else it would just be a throwaway thing of just like, go out there and, we'll just pick some random guys. So there is something to it. But that, to me, is where I don't know why you're making it so difficult. Who cares if it's a transfer or a player that's been there before or a freshman? I don't care. The players, you'd be like, hey, we're getting captains. You guys cast your votes. The top 4 votes for the top 4 players, those are the captains. And then nobody can have a problem with it because the players are the ones that voted on it. So I get it. I'm with you, Curtis, too. I get what he's trying to do and how it might be something that's nice. But I'm like, okay, this is SEC football, though. This is big boy football. This is something to where you shouldn't have to try to please everybody or try to do certain things. Your captains are your captains. And when you're your captains, they handle it. Plain and simple.
On your chest.
Yeah.
We're just going to have no C's on the chest? Is that what we're doing?
All C's on the chest.
Everybody
C's on every chest.
Yep. Everyone's going to get a C.
I don't know, man. I don't know why that rubbed me the wrong way the way it did, but it's like make a decision, but it's whatever. I'm moving on. I'm not gonna dwell on that one.
The more I think about it though, the more I realize it definitely is him being salty that some of their captains have transferred.
Oh, 100%.
That has, because the first thing you mentioned was with the transfer portal now. Well, then if that's the case, make that part of the criteria. Like when y'all are voting on your captains, hand out the papers to your team and be like, hey, here's the criteria. Guys who are committed to Arkansas, guys who are, team leaders, and like do whatever you want to do. But yeah, I don't know, just kind of punting on captains. That's a wild move.
Yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, I think 3 of the 4 captains from last year transferred out, which was KJ, Rocket, and Poop Hall, I believe, because I think Landon Jackson was the other one. Could be wrong, but yeah, that's something that definitely goes into it. And another thing that, of course, is always a topic of conversation is about the fact that this game against UAPB, yes, it is on Thursday night, but it's in Little Rock. It's at War Memorial Stadium. And boy, I tell you what, when the opening happened, you could tell Sam Pittman was really pumped to play this game in Little Rock. But he also was asked about the future of these games in Little Rock at War Memorial Stadium.
Play next year. Is there an ideal for you in this scenario?
I think the only concerning thing, and I think half of the, I don't know that the word's problem, half of the concern, okay, is that we're going to play in our stadium once in the first 5 games. And one of them's in Little Rock and one of them's in Dallas. Now, the Dallas game is, we'll end up playing Texas A&M here next year. But if you look at it and you consistently look at it, I believe the year we won 9, I think we had 6 games, and I think 4 of them, y'all check me on this, but I'm saying I think 4 of them were home games, and we were in here twice. And I, to be honest with you, I just don't know that it's fair to the fans. I mean, they know where the University of Arkansas is. They can plan it. They can get here for games. I think they want to be here for games. So there are problems with that, including the one for 5 here. I don't know the answer, to be honest with you, in the future. Obviously, we're going to go play Arkansas State a year from now over there in Little Rock, but I think there's a lot of conversation probably needs to be had between now and 2026.
Okay, so it's not a problem, it's a concern, by the way, because there's a huge difference between that. But speaking about the game itself, I mean, I'll give him credit. He was pretty candid about it. You can tell it's not something that he necessarily enjoys, and basically is like, hey, the games are up here. You got people who need to just plan it and getting to come up here. And there was a couple of years ago where they only had 2 games in Fayetteville, and only playing 1 game in Fayetteville in your first 5 games is a problem. So he's not saying anything new, but just him kind of coming out and being very candid about it, I think, is kind of why I still believe that next year Arkansas State Little Rock game will be the final one in War Memorial Stadium ever moving forward.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't care. I really don't care about this, but I do think that I agree with him on the standpoint of it being an issue when you have that game and the Southwest Classic game. That's what causes things like you're having this year, with the 5 different stadiums in 5 weeks or whatever. Part of that situation is going to go away, after this year. And so then fine. But yeah, I mean, would I like to see them continue to play games in Little Rock? Sure. Does it have to be every year? I don't know. But I think there are ways to avoid exactly what you're dealing with on your schedule right now. And that's what they need to do, independent of Little Rock or Jerry World or whatever. Like, you cannot put your football program in this type of situation. It's a disadvantage. And I think it's going to show with all that travel when they get back for a week 6 game at home, which should be really exciting against a Tennessee team that's coming off a bye, and you've just been bussing all over the country for 5 weeks. It's nobody else does that. They just don't.
Yeah. Shout out to Sam Pittman for having a weird take on the captain thing, but then following it up with a really good take on the Little Rock thing. He said something that stuck out to me. They know where the University of Arkansas is. They can plan around it. Literally, like it's for all the talk about like, oh, well, Fayetteville's so far away. People don't have trouble getting to Fayetteville, and they don't have trouble getting to that game. I mean, even when Arkansas played Kent State and BYU last year, there were a decent amount of fans there. Like they usually do a good job of filling that stadium up when the team is competent. They never fill the Little Rock Stadium up for the last decade, even when the team's been good, And so it's like, I don't know. I don't know who the Little Rock games are for at this point. And also it's just like you said, it's a disadvantage. I see Fishman saying you can't bring recruits to Little Rock. That's a big deal. It just seems like kind of a no-brainer. And so I'm glad that Pittman didn't sugarcoat it and do the whole thing of like, well, we love our state, we love the Southern, but do the whole thing. He was just like, yeah, it kind of sucks that we have to do this, but hopefully after next year, everyone will get their fill.
Can I take him for his word that they are for sure playing Texas A&M in Fayetteville next year? Or you think that that's just maybe him thinking, well, we're playing, they're technically
a road.
Take
him at his word. No.
Yeah. Because I was like, man, okay, so they're playing Texas A&M in Fayetteville this year or next year. So there's one game that you for sure know it's going to be happening. But
the first game of that campus series should be in Fayetteville after Arkansas had to go to College Station randomly during the COVID thing. That's not how the SEC works. I understand that, but yeah, I mean, it should be in Fayetteville. Yeah. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Because then also that would make sense because then you go to Texas next year, like on the road. So that way you don't have to play A&M and Texas on the road next season. So
that'd be gross. Yeah.
That would be pretty rough. And also there was another thing too. I mean, there's a few things that he said of note, but also I just found it was fascinating as far as the practices and being open and, deciding to close them for pretty much the entire season at this point in time. And he gives his reasoning behind that.
Well, guys, it's a really critical year for us. I mean, it is. It's a big year for us, and I just wanted to keep as much as we could everything in-house. A lot of times, in all honesty, from our observing practice, there's some information that I don't want out that gets out. And it's just a big year, and that's no negative towards anybody. It's just human nature. So-and-so's not starting today, they moved this guy to this. And, I'm not saying you can't find that out anyway, because we can call people, right? But it's a big year for us. And we just wanted to keep everything in-house as much as we possibly could. Now, we also understand that you have a job to do and that media is part of our family. And sometimes we like it, sometimes we don't. But you are a part of Hog and a part of our family. We understand that too. So we're trying to find as good of a togetherness as we possibly can have. And to be honest with you, I'd like to see where it goes, and then we'll decide in the future. But we do not want to shut you out of what's going on. There was just too many things I felt like going on that people knew about our program that I didn't necessarily want them to.
Okay, am I really the only one that feels like during the season, at least, that practices should be closed and probably not open? I mean, yeah, selfishly, everybody'd like to know something, but I don't know. I've always felt like I'm totally fine with not knowing the ins and outs of each and every practice and watching it. And I don't think it's necessarily needed from pretty much any school that would want that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a media member, you want as much access as you can possibly get. But the truth of the matter, I imagine Andrew agrees with this, is the in season, the practices that were open were Mondays and Tuesdays for about 15 minutes a day. And that, Mondays is usually anybody who got tackled over the weekend. They're like not practicing or they're limited or whatever. It's almost like a rest day. Sharpening some things up. You really don't get much out of that. So I'm not sure outside of, who's there and who's not kind of deal, like what was trickling out of that was such a big deal. But yeah, I really don't think it makes that much of a difference. I did kind of chuckle at the, media's part of the family. You ain't invited to Sunday dinner now, but you're part of the family. Okay. You're just like the third cousin, but yeah, I don't know, man. I'm not bothered by it, honestly.
Yeah, I'm with you, Curtis, in the fact that, like, as someone who covers the team, like, I always enjoyed going to practice. Anytime, like you said, we'll take as much access as you can give us. But what were we necessarily getting a ton out of it? Not really. There's not really a ton of notable developments. But I also just think about it from their point of view, where it's like, why would Sam Pittman be incentivized to like open up practices to people? Like, what are they getting out of it?
Right.
Like, I guess a little bit extra coverage that we were going to provide either way. I don't think it really moves the needle for them. And so, yeah, I think that there's definitely, and when you look around the SEC, there's a lot of teams that close practices entirely, that don't have people come there at all. And so, yeah, I think, frankly, it's not that big of a deal that they're closing practices. I don't know why a lot of people in our industry seem to be very, like, they take it personally. And I don't know why they would.
Well, I mean, nobody ever in the media is entitled. They're not entitlement driven at all, ever.
I will say, like, if you had a choice, I really mean this, if you had a choice of practice being open, like in spring and during camp or in the season, I would take spring and camp 100 times out of 100.
For sure.
That's true.
I'm cool with it, man.
Yeah. I think that, yeah, the way it's set up is just fine. I don't see it being a problem at all. So, all right. So that'll be a perfect little segue as we get into our Arkansas update presented by Davis and Garrett Insurance, your independent auto owners insurance agency, securing what matters the most. Go see my boy Clayton over there. He'll get you set up with all your insurance needs and a few things that are going on in the landscape of Razorback sports. We'll start with the basketball side of things, as officially now it's Arkansas and Baylor in Dallas. So that is a thing that we can finally talk about, Curtis.
Yeah, heck yeah. I'm excited about that. We tried to tease that without being too specific because it just wasn't done, when we were talking about it last week. And a lot of people had kind of been hinting at it. But I'm really, really glad that John Calipari and Scott Drew were able to come together and get this done. It originally looked like this game was going to be kind of targeted for like the week before Christmas, like in December, kind of in this, the time frame before, like right after the North Little Rock game and, before Christmas break. And it sounded like that kind of hit a snag. So I didn't know if they were going to get it done. Well, now it turns out it's going to be the first week of the freaking season. So that's going to be awesome, man. November the 9th, playing in Dallas, American Airlines Center. Just a great game. Baylor's going to be a top 10 team. Arkansas is going to be pushing it. Man, it's just the kind of games that you can look forward to on the schedule with John Calipari. And now you look at this non-conference schedule and listen, I'm not going to argue with anybody who says it'd be really cool if they could play a decent opponent at Bud Walton Arena. I agree. They still got a couple games to schedule. We'll see what happens. But, buddy, to have games against Baylor and Illinois that are easily drivable to travel to, and plus, playing at a place like Miami, playing at Madison Square Garden, it's a hell of a job by John Calipari getting such a late start on this thing.
Yeah, people have been complaining about the home schedule of Bud Walton forever, and we've always kind of said, good luck getting any respectable program, at least a high major program, to want to travel in the middle of the holidays or anywhere around the holidays, November, December, to Bud Walton to play a true road game. This is a lot more doable. This makes a lot of sense. We've always talked about how Arkansas has the University of Arkansas has such a strong connection to that Dallas-Fort Worth area. So you continue to kind of plant some seeds there. I think it's awesome. There'll be a ton of fans there from both sides. I mean, we've seen Arkansas and Baylor have some fun matchups over the last few years here, both of which went against Arkansas. But I think this is awesome. I think just two fun programs getting together and playing a game, and it's a win-win-win for everyone. I'm all for this.
Yeah, they did a better job of scheduling this compared to the Alan Jackson concerts in Bud Walton Arena or whatever that is for the day of the Texas A&M game in Dallas. At least this is during the bye week on November 9th. So what do you think? Which one do you think will have more people, Razorback fans, at? Probably that game over the Illinois-Kansas City game, right? Since it's Thanksgiving.
Probably. Yeah, probably because of Thanksgiving and because there's I shouldn't say, no, I'll say this. There are way more Arkansas fans, I think, that are just naturally located in Dallas and in that region than there are in Kansas City, even though Kansas City is an easier drive maybe from Fayetteville. But yeah, I would say so.
So will there be more Razorback fans at the Kansas City game or Madison Square Garden for the Michigan game?
I'll still say the Kansas City game, even though that's tricky. But I guarantee there's going to be a lot of fans at Madison Square Garden.
The only reason I threw Madison Square Garden in there is because, one, it never happens playing a game at Madison Square Garden. Two, it's not on a holiday, like on Thanksgiving, like it is there. And three, it's like, I feel like a lot of fans take it as like, okay, we can travel to one game this year or whatever. What's it going to be? Yeah. Oh, for sure doing Madison Square Garden. We won't go to Kansas City or Dallas or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, either way, there'll be Razorback fans showing up to all of these games, though, and you'll hear them. There'll be plenty of them there. Also, some note for some basketball, too. And Curtis, I know you know a lot about this as well. You got Malik Thomas, 5-star. He's one of the top guards in the 2025 class. He has scheduled official visits to Arkansas as well as Alabama. This is according to Joe Tipton. So another 5-star going to make an official visit over to the Razorbacks.
Yeah, that's big time. And that's going to be on that weekend, September 13th, 14th. It's the UAB football weekend, but that's also when Cal has another top 10 5-star in Koa Pete visiting. So I don't know, like what's a bigger deal, the Arkansas UAB football game or potentially a triple dip of 5-star visitors for basketball, because those two guys are locked in. And then it leaked earlier last week that Chris Sinak, who's a 6'11", 5-star forward in the 2025 class, would be visiting that weekend. Then they pumped the brakes on that. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It just means that wasn't officially set in stone yet. But you might have 3, top 10 prospects, future lottery picks walking around on campus on the sidelines for that UAB game. Big time stuff from Cal. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then in 2026, you guys remember Sean Andrews? Mini Sean, JJ Andrews, who's could be one of the best prospects to come out of Arkansas in a long time. 5-star guy already. He's going to be visiting in October. So Cal's getting to work, man, with those blue chip recruits for sure.
Dude, they got to get JJ Andrews at Arkansas. Yeah. Like that just has to happen. I'll do whatever I have to do to contribute to the cause. Got to get that happening. But my reaction to seeing Malik Thomas's visits, I just think I feel bad for him from this regard, because whichever program he doesn't commit to, that fan base is going to hate him, and they're going to hate him way more than whatever the other program loves him. I feel like I can already see it now. Like whether it's Hog fans or Alabama fans that are just gonna be like, we never wanted that bum anywhere. He sucks. Blah, blah, just like whoever he doesn't commit to. So I love when recruits, because obviously you're competing with these programs for a lot of recruits, but when it comes down to something like this, because I mean Nick Smith was kind of similar, same thing. That just adds to the animosity. So I always love stuff like that.
Yeah. And then the interesting thing about Malik is he was scheduled to take an official visit over the summer in July. And that got postponed right about the time that Darius Acuff committed to Arkansas. So right away it was like, oh, was this a one or the other type thing? And then he went and visited UConn Malik Thomas did. And it was like, oh, he's going to UConn. Then time kind of drug on. And that hasn't materialized. And now things have been trending back towards Arkansas. He's got that visit rescheduled. And so you wonder, has Arkansas kind of passed UConn as the leader there? The other school that was being talked about, behind the scenes was Kansas State as a potential visit spot for him. And they don't have a visit scheduled yet, but then Alabama appears out of nowhere. So maybe Cal can kind of work his magic. That visit at Arkansas is the 13th and 14th of September. The Alabama visit is 2 weeks later. Ideally, he never makes it to Tuscaloosa.
Curtis, I have it on good authority that the reason the Kansas State visit fell through is because Coleman Hawkins asked for another $1 million on top of his initial $1 million. So they didn't have it in the budget.
Yeah, they might have to go back to the Bay Fall well over there and take away from him.
Bay Fall, would he take a cut? They were like, "Hey man, we got to get this kid on campus," and he was like, "No, I'm not budging."
Well, yeah. Then going back to the whole Sean Andrews kids thing, it's so funny how former Razorbacks they'll always like, oh well, his dad was a Razorback or whatever, so it gives you the opportunity. Which in a lot of cases it's true, but of all the former great players, I just feel like Sean Andrews is not one that's really been involved or anything with the Razorbacks football or anything since he left. Which I'm not saying he's not saying he doesn't love the Razorbacks or anything, but you see a lot of former greats that are really involved, and you see other former greats where you just never hear from them. They're never honored at a game. They're never attending. It's just, I don't know. I don't know if that ever plays a thing into it, but just don't assume that a player, oh, well, his dad went to Arkansas. No, that doesn't always mean anything because they want to make their own decision.
I remember the first time I saw JJ Andrews on campus, and I think he was a 9th grader, and I legit thought it was like a transfer recruit. Like that, he's just such a grown man already. That dude is put together, which makes sense. It kind of runs in the bloodline, which is interestingly enough. I know I'm backtracking here, but Koa Pete, who's also visiting that 5-star on that same weekend as Malik Thomas. I didn't realize until I was doing a little bit of research the other day that both his father and brother played in the NBA, or the NFL. So they were both professional football players, and he's a basketballer. Then you got Sean Andrews, and then he produces JJ, who's just going to be a, future lottery pick basketball player. So, athleticism runs in the bloodlines with these people.
JJ much skinnier than his father, though.
Yeah. I'll never forget with Sean Andrews. It was so controversial back then. He sat out the Independence Bowl for Arkansas against Missouri because he had nasal polyps. So like that was the reason why. When in reality it was, I'm not trying to hurt myself in an Independence Bowl. I'm trying to get drafted into the NFL. So ended up being a first-round pick, and I think it worked out for him. Also, another part of the Arkansas update, and I know you tweeted about this too, Andrew. Looks like Hagen Smith doing Hagen Smith things while being Hagen Smith in minor league baseball.
Yeah, I don't remember what I was doing. I was watching football a lot that day. Watching football, watching fights, and it just happened to be at a time where I could watch the entire outing. So I got to watch Hagen Smith's first official professional outing. It's a lot of fun, man. I mean, he looked like Hagen Smith. Was blowing that fastball up in the zone by left-handed hitters. That slider was unhittable. He got a few swords against some folks and ran into some trouble in the 3rd inning, gave up a couple base hits, and then just immediately struck out the next 3 guys. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, he looked like Hagen Smith, and so I saw a bunch of White Sox fans who were very encouraged by the outing that he was able to put together. So Razorback fans, you'll be shocked to know that high A hitters had few answers for Hagen Smith similar to most SEC hitters.
Now, tell me this, Andrew, in your professional baseball knowing opinion, I get it that it's not ideal, but could Hagen Smith be in the White Sox bullpen right now? I mean, hell, they're 31-100.
He could. He absolutely could. The thing is, if you're the White Sox, it's like you might as well let him simmer and groom him up as a starter. Because I think obviously they're hoping that he's going to be a big league starter for them for a long time. But I feel like if he had gotten drafted, he was in that range, Curtis, where he could have been helping the Cardinals kind of work their way back into playoff contention. Whereas I think if he had gotten drafted to a team that was more in that mix, it would have been very tempting to try and ramp him up. I feel like he could get any left-handed hitter out on the planet right now. I'm not saying he'd be like the best closer in the big leagues or whatever, but I have no doubt that he could get big league hitters out at this point in time. But I think it probably makes a little bit of sense with the White Sox and a team that's that far in a rebuild where it's like heavy tank season, you might as well just let him simmer. And so, but hey, I will say, I don't know if y'all saw Dylan Cruz from LSU just got called up to the Nationals like the other day. I think he's making his debut today. Skeens obviously is like a big league all-star starter right now. And so we've seen it happen a lot over the last 5-6 years. The SEC prepares you for MLB baseball as well as just about anything. I mean, a lot of these guys just kind of skip on right through there. I know Kumar Rocker's about to make his debut here soon, or Jack Leiter's about to make his debut, and Kumar Rocker, who's had a bunch of injuries, he's also not too far away. Like, I think that's got to be tempting for a lot of these high school players who are top prospects to look and see how quickly some of these SEC guys are making that transition. It's pretty interesting. So yeah, if the White Sox make a miraculous turnaround next year and are like in playoff contention, I think they're going to be very tempted to bring him up and get him to get left-handed hitters out for sure.
Man, I was really hoping that the Cardinals were going to be able to draft Hagen Smith there, because last year they took, remember the big lefty from Stanford, Quinn Matthews, the dude threw like 156 pitches in a game, and he's mowing people down in the minors. So I was thinking, okay, in the future, Quinn Matthews, Hagen Smith, a couple lefties at the top of the rotation, but no. He'll be a White Sox. Congratulations.
He'll be in the South Side cooking.
Speaking
that
of,
would have been cool because we could have also seen him obviously in Springdale, when he was playing with as he made his way up through the Cardinals system. So
yeah,
I don't even know who I got. Oh, I know who the White Sox AA team is, and it's not around here. It's Birmingham Barons. He will be following the Michael Jordan legacy.
Wait a minute. The Naturals are the Royals, right? Still, or did that change?
No, they are. But I was saying
okay.
They're in the same division, the Naturals, as the Springfield Cardinals. So like if Hagen had gotten drafted by the Cardinals, we'd be able to see him pitch in Springdale more likely than not.
Okay, gotcha. Because I was making sure. I was like, oh crap, did that change? Man, I haven't kept up with the times. By the way, just randomly, I don't know if you even know it, Andrew. Like, who's the quickest Razorback player to go through to make their big league debut?
Benintendi, it was like 14 months or something
it was quick
like
for
that.
him.
I'm guessing someone back in the day, like Jeff King or something, like had a quicker. But Benintendi, I remember that being like a huge deal when he got up so quickly. At least in my lifetime, I feel like he's the quickest, but I have no idea.
Yeah, well, there you have it. There's your Arkansas update. And that moves us on into a perfect segue, because since it's the weekend and there's a lot of things to talk about and bring up and discuss and dive into there too. We're going to have a best and worst of the weekend brought to you by, of course, Hopper Termite and Pest. All of you who are dealing with termites, all of you dealing with pest, you got to call Hopper, because they're going to eradicate the issue for you immediately and make sure that you get taken care of so you don't have to deal with these pests anymore. You can call them at 479-750-4070. That's 479-750-4070. You can check out their website at callhopper.com. But when you get that first treatment, be sure to mention my last name, Neighbors, and you get $50 off your very first treatment, because nobody wants to deal with pests. They're piled pests for a reason. And Hopper knows that. They're going to take care of you. Get them going today and get rid of those pests out of your house with Call Hopper at 479-750-4070. All right. So since it's, we'll just have a little fun segment out of this. Just the best and worst of the weekend, guys, and highlights, lowlights. Everyone want to see it real quick before we get out of here. And I'll go ahead and kick it off with the best of the weekend for me. Best of the weekend for me was seeing not Florida State play, but Florida State's kicker. Because, listen, kickers are kickers. We all know how they're looked at. People usually either know them because they miss big kicks, or that they miss game winners, or if they're just next level great. But to go over there in Ireland, I don't know if it's just the air is a little bit thinner or something like that in Dublin, but the dude just is cranking out 59-yard field goal makes. And luckily for him, that was really the only reason why Florida State was even able to be competitive in this game, it seemed like. But that guy was just cranking them out, booming them, and piss missiling them right through the uprights. So kudos to him. He was the best I saw the weekend. Yeah,
that was really, really cool. That was fun to watch. I enjoyed that. My best of the weekend, it's the Dallas Fire Department. Did you guys read about this?
I did not read about this. No.
So I guess the Chargers were in town for a preseason football game, whatever. Over a dozen of their players got stuck on an elevator at the hotel in Dallas. And you know how some of those, there's not floors that you can get off and stay in a room in hotels for an elevator. It skips a bunch of floors or whatever, for whatever reason. But from floor 3 to 15, there is no stop. You just got to get to 15 and then you go on up to the rooms. And the elevator just got stuck there for 2 hours. Those guys were stuck on an elevator. We're talking about big football players. Who's the quarterback for the Chargers? Herbert?
Yes.
He was on there.
Actually, I didn't realize this was in Dallas, but I did hear about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
This
And
is fun.
so eventually the fire department got there and they like broke the panel off the top and they were just pulling everybody out from the roof of the elevator to get them out of there. So kudos to them for doing that. But it was so funny to hear. I don't know if you guys, well, I guess you haven't listened to it, but Jim Harbaugh was asked about it and he was like, I just wish I was on there with them. I mean, talk about an experience, talk about coming together, men being men. It's a test of will.
He was really impressed with his quarterback's leadership from the
He
sound
was.
of it.
Yeah,
He was like, credit to him, man. The guy had it going on. But yeah, Harbaugh's the only person I can think, only coach I can think of jealous of his players for being stuck in an elevator.
Wish I was
that's some good stuff there. So I've got a few things that I wanted to point out because there's a lot that happened this weekend. A lot of football. The Sharps were all on Georgia Tech and we all won big on that. We had them plus 10.5, but I also sprinkled the money line. And as Sam Pittman said, I didn't think that game was a fluke. Like I thought that like Georgia Tech was just a better team like that day, but I also just didn't think Florida State was that great. Did y'all watch any of the SMU game?
Watch the whole thing.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Wild.
I mean, they came through. They had their quarterback who had a really good year last year, 28 touchdowns, 6 picks, really struggled a lot in that game. But he made some big throws down the stretch. That tight end they have, really good. But the team I wanted, my best of the weekend that I wanted to shout out to McNeese, the Cowboys of Lake Charles, who were down 26-7. And they were, I think it was like plus 15.5 was the spread. They made their way all the way back to where they had a chance to win the game. Or actually, that's a lie. They had a chance to send it to overtime. And do y'all remember the name Tyler Larko? If you don't, it's 'cause he didn't play at Arkansas at all, but he was a kicker on Arkansas's roster. He's now McNeese's kicker. And they gave him a chance. They decided there was like 8 seconds left and it was third down and they took a sack and they were like, you know what? We're just going to kick it on third down. And he missed that kick. Missed it. Wasn't even close. And McNeese lost, but they saved me some money. And so, Carlton, if you're watching, I apologize. Had to steal some money from Bet Saracen this weekend. Deposited 50 on Friday. Came out with 102. I apologize for bankrupting the company, but had a great weekend at the office. I wanted to shout out the Cowboys because I thought they were toast. I thought they were about to get ran out of the park by Tarleton State, but I really wish that we were not in this situation where I was watching all these stupid FCS games. I watched a lot of FCS football this week.
I did too. I stayed up until about 2:30 in the morning for that Hawaii-Delaware stage to make sure that the final leg of the parlay hit. So
Did you have the under in that one? Because I had the under and I was really panicking down the stretch.
I think I had I had Delaware State covering actually.
Gotcha.
It was like 40 points or whatever it was. And they did.
They tried to make it interesting, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was so I had the under because there was 46-mile-an-hour wind gusts. And I felt really good about it. And it was like 7-0 halfway through the second quarter. And I'm like, perfect. The under was like 55. Then there was like a punt return touchdown. Delaware State put together like a 1-minute drive. All of a sudden, like points just started coming in bunches. So I watched to the end, and I think Hawaii ended up kneeling at like the 18-yard line. And if they had scored a touchdown, it would have been toast. But credit to Hawaii, man, and credit to Montana State, who we kind of disrespected a little bit. They didn't cover because they were 14-point favorites, but they did have a nice little comeback victory over New Mexico, the Lobos.
That was fun.
See, that's actually my worst of the weekend was my betting because I lost every one of them. And it was impressive almost. Like I first off, like the underdogs of Georgia Tech, New Mexico, Nevada, Delaware State all covered. And I had 3 of those games where I had the favorite winning that. Then they didn't. Then also had the over-under in that SMU game. Didn't hit. And it just was a brutal weekend for me of sports betting. So I just needed whatever I go with my gut when I first initially do it, just go with the opposite. So Carlton got his money back on me, Andrew. Don't worry, because I've lost every bit of it. So that was my worst of the weekend is just my sports betting. And I was all excited about it. And there's no worse way to start off week 0 than to suck at it.
That's tough. You know what my worst of the weekend was? Did you guys see the home plate umpire in the Yankees game yesterday?
I don't think I did.
Giancarlo Stanton, big man, big power, took a swing, fouled one off. It broke his bat and it hit the umpire in the neck, and he had to get carted off the field. Like he got a concussion. Was getting a bunch of tests ran and everything like that. Could you imagine? That's brutal, man. Yeah, like you'll see a foul ball and sometimes the ball will hit him in the mask or whatever. The dude took a bat to the neck and had to be carted out of the stadium. That was tough.
Did it get around? Because don't they have that little like neck protector thing? Did it get around it?
Yeah, it got him pretty good. Concussed from it. I got maybe a whiplash thing because I don't know that really hit him in the head, but yeah.
Well, my worst of the weekend is a little bit of an off the cuff one. The worst thing I saw this weekend is the same worst thing I've been seeing for the last like 6 weekends. I'm still seeing Hawk Tua memes everywhere.
Oh boy.
And look, I understand. We had a lot of fun. The Hawk Tua thing was cool. I know that Tua Tagovailoa is about to start his season, so there'll be some of those jokes and whatever. As a society, guys, we got to move on. We gotta move past Hawk Tua. It's rare because the original joke wasn't even that funny. Like I didn't even think the original video was that funny, but it kind of became a funny internet meme, and we had our fun. But guys, we got to let it go. We have allowed this young girl, Haley Welch, to become famous. She's tweeting at Elon every day. She's signing brand deals and stuff. I see all these like horny people in her comments all the time. Guys, we got to let Hawk Tua go. We all had fun. It was great. Maybe here and there you can maybe make an offhand reference if it's creative enough. Give up the Hawk Tua. And if you're a fantasy football league commissioner, you are well within your rights. If someone in your league has a name involving Hawk Tua, you are well within your rights as the commissioner to suspend their best player and to just take them off the roster completely. Guys, move on from Hawk Tua. We got to do it. We got to. No more Hawk Tua in football season. I'm sorry.
I'm with you on that. And yeah, I keep seeing her like pop up on like my Instagram reels and stuff of her doing interviews with people. And I'm like, this is still a thing. Okay. Still nothing new in her life other than just that. So yeah.
Elon Musk is like tweeting out Hawk Tua memes and everybody's like, LMAO fam, this is so funny. I'm like, bro, what are we doing?
The more she's online, the less intriguing of an individual she is. Kind of, really not doing anything for me.
Yeah. You remember
we're out of society though. We make these people she threw the first pitch at the Yankees game like 3 days ago. I was like, what are we doing?
Yeah, it's
crazy.
Dude. Well, do you guys remember Ken Bone by chance, that name?
Oh,
Ken
yeah.
Bone?
Yeah.
See, that's what it reminds me of. Because I remember Ken Bone from, I guess he was the one that asked the question. He was the big dude with this like sweater in the I guess it was the actual debate in 2016 with Hillary and Trump or whatever. He was an audience member. People blew up. He's like, this guy Ken Bone. Well, then he became a thing, and then he like signed on to do podcasts and stuff. I'm like, and nothing happened. I'm like, okay, see, that's kind of what I feel like with the Hawk Tua girl. It's like, okay, you had a moment that's nice, but doesn't mean, he had a moment. Therefore, this person's a content creator and can make tons of money because people are so fascinated with what this guy has to say. It ain't like that.
What's her name? This MFer is not real girl.
Oh yeah. Her.
She had a run on the internet too, where she was like 3 months. She was on like Theo Von's. I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah. It's intense. All right. Just a couple minutes real quick. Get to some of the chats. Jackson wants to know, how much steam does the Rhett Lashley train have today?
Well, I told the fellas in the group chat, I guess Saturday while that was going down, that I've taken Rhett Lashley off of our hypothetical Arkansas coaches hot board after that. That was
rough.
That was rough, man. First game jitters though. They'll get it together. They'll figure it out.
They got the win.
Playing hammer down next week.
Yep.
He was so openly annoyed with his team. Like every time they'd cut him on the sideline, he was just like rolling his eyes. Like he was so mad at his team, but they did get the job done. But we'll see. I was really impressed with New Mexico, their first year head coach, who I'd never heard of. Seems like he's on the right track. You know what he was? He was the Montana State head coach.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
that's why they got all that respect from Vegas. Turns out the secret sauce is in Reno.
Also, a Fishman. Shout out to Fishman for the donation to the cause. Thank you. It says, what's the chance Boogie averages more than 12 points and 4 assists this season? I've heard a dude is a scoring freak. Talking about Boogie Fland. Man,
it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out, because you got Nelly Davis in that backcourt. He's going to take a bunch of shots. DJ Wagner, he started at Kentucky over a couple lottery picks last year, so he's probably going to get plenty of minutes too. I could see Boogie doing one or the other, maybe, but I don't know if I could see him doing both. He could get to 12 points per game. If he emerges as Arkansas's knockdown 3-point shooter besides Nelly Davis, then I could really see it happen. They need him to do that. Especially if Nelly's going to be the guy where it's like a late clock situation, get the hell out of his way and let him cook. Who's going to stand in the corner and be able to get those kickouts and knock down threes? I think Boogie could be that guy, or he could really become the table setter and the distributor, making plays for others. And I could see him getting to that 4 assist range. So personally, I don't know if I see him doing both, but I do think one or the other is a strong possibility.
I think even if you think he's like firmly going to beat out DJ Wagner and play more than him, it's still a stretch. Like, I think the 4 assists, like that's a lot of assists in college basketball, low key. But yeah,
how many
like
Anthony
Boogie
Black?
fans,
Anthony Black averaged about 4, I guess, as a freshman. I think.
Yeah. And he had the ball a lot and played like 33 minutes a game. You know, like
also
shout out Fishman though. That was sweet.
Question. Yeah, appreciate that. Rich says, when did the narrative about Little Rock start to shift? The Big Burt era. I assume this was you highlighting this one, Andrew.
Yeah, it was obviously the ULM game. By the way, I was at that one. I shed tears at that one. It definitely, the ULM game broke me as a human. It broke a lot of people, and I think that's when that stadium began to really have some negative voodoo, and then Burt solidified it by losing to Toledo.
I agree with half of that, and I think the other half was when LSU game moved out, because that was the same year that it moved out of Little Rock. So I think that was a big part of it. All right, yeah, appreciate everybody listening in, watching, and all that stuff, guys. Any final thoughts before we roll out of here?
Yeah, just a couple more days. We're almost there.
3 days.
Wait.
3 days. Already had somebody get mad at me that I posted about Alex Collins, number 3, and not Joe Adams, number 3. I love people. They're great. But appreciate each and every one of you listening in, watching in to the Inside Arkansas Live as we are getting ready for games. Finally. So for Andrew Ellis, as well as Curtis Wilkerson, I'm John Neighbors. Same sports show, same sports channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.